In this video, I'd like to talk about classifying complex numbers. And so with these example problems, we're going to be given some number and we'll need to determine if the number is real, imaginary, complex, or some combination of these three. And the general idea is that all numbers are complex. So every possible number, whether it's a normal real number like 3 or a purely imaginary number like minus 77i, all numbers are complex numbers. And they're usually written in the form a plus bi, where this a value is a real number and this bi is an imaginary number. So for this number, we first of all know that since it is a number, it is a complex number. So that's going to be a given for all of these problems. It will always be a complex number. Now, to be a real number, it would have to have an imaginary part of 0. So to be real, the b value in this a plus ib, this would have to be 0. And in this case, it has both a real part and an imaginary part. So a in this case is 3, and b is this minus 77. The imaginary part is the number attached to I. So in this case, b is minus 77. And a purely real number would be something like 3 or 9 or minus 22. Some number that we're very used to, some number that can be found on the real number line, where again, the imaginary part of that number is just going to be 0. Now, for a number to be purely imaginary, that's when the real part of the number has to be 0. And so that would be a number like 2i or minus 77i, or let's say 13i. So again, you're going to have infinite possibilities here. But imaginary numbers, these are purely imaginary. They have a real part of 0. But in both of these cases, you can still write them as a complex number. So for instance, the number 3 is really 3 plus 0i. Just like the number 9 is 9 plus 0i. So it's still a complex number, it just has 0 for its imaginary part. And likewise, for these imaginary numbers, these purely imaginary numbers, so a number like 2i, this is going to be a complex number with real part of 0. So this is 0 plus 2i. Whereas something like minus 77i is 0 minus 77i. So they're still complex numbers, but their real parts are just 0. So if the real parts are 0, it's purely imaginary. If the imaginary parts are 0, then it's purely a real number. But like I said, in every case, it's still a complex number.